Brad Harris, for years, were the face of Loman Game Calls and is the inventor of what we now know today as the Grunt Call. He has now also created BHO, Brad Harris Outdoors, that is a Christian-based organization dedicated to his passion and his love for the outdoors and sharing knowledge with his friends, family, and other outdoor enthusiasts. Welcome, Brad, to our YouTube series, Lessons Learned in the Woods.
Well, thanks for having me.
Well, I appreciate that. You kind of shaped a whole generation. I mean, for many people, didn't have cable, didn't have ESPN Outdoors. Loman call videos, VHS tapes out of Walmart. That's how I was introduced to you. Whitetail Challenge 3 was where I found you. That was many years ago for both of us.
Yeah.
How did you get involved in the outdoors? Do you remember a time where you said, hey, I want to learn how to hunt, or I want to go with you so-and-so and hunt with you?
Well, from a very early age, I was just enthused about hunting and the outdoors. I mean, I can, remember as young as 10 years old that I would just go to my grandfather's house on Sunday after church and listen to him tell hunting stories. We'd sit in the yard and he would whittle on cedar, or he was always whittling something, and he would tell stories about some of his adventures out hunting. I mean, everything from squirrels to deer and turkey, and his stories were really they just mesmerized me, and I'd listen to him and think about it, and it just built a fire in me to want to be a part of that. Now, my father and my brother, all my older brothers, they all hunted. My uncles, everybody hunted in our family. And so, it was just natural. But I could, sitting and listening to my grandfather tell stories about pre-depression days of hunting in the hills when there wasn't much wildlife to speak of. And the days and the hours and the weeks and the time you spent, and it wasn't about the harvest or the kill. It was just about the adventure for me. And so it just built a fire in me. And of course, my dad, being a hunter, he encouraged us boys to spend time in the field and the outdoors. He would much rather see us hunting and fishing than he would want to see us go to town and on a Friday night or a Saturday. He felt more comfortable with us in the field or in the woods or on the river than he did in the towns and the cities. So it was just a good fit. It was a natural fit. It was just something I grew up with.
Well, and speaking of your grandfather's stories, that was pre-depression time. That was back when deer were kind of on the almost extinct level compared, and now they've just morphed into more than what we can deal with. But those were some tough people back then.
Oh my goodness, yeah. We are so blessed to have lived through the 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, whatever, to see the growth, the explosion of wild turkey and white-tailed deer, the comeback of the antelope and the elk. And yeah, we've been blessed. But the old timers, they were on the ultimate downside. I mean, there was very, very little amount of, especially big game back in those days. And so to hear them match wits with what few critters they got a chance to target was just pretty impressive to me. And so as a young man, I want to hunt and fish. And then I love sports too. I love baseball. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be great to either hunt for a living or play pro baseball for a living? Well, I never was quite good enough to make to play the big leagues in baseball, but I worked really hard at my hunting skills, and the wild turkey was starting to make a huge comeback when I was a teenager, and it was just a good fit. And Grandpa gave me his knowledge, made me handmade calls for me, and taught me what little he knew about calling turkey, which really wasn't a lot back then, but it's certainly sufficient. And it just built a fire in me. So I started hunting, and small game, obviously my first venture, and then wild turkey and deer were my big game exposures. And but I really wanted to learn as much as I possibly could, and the there was a little turkey calling contest being held at a school in the middle of the southeast Ozark somewhere, and I'd heard about them, and my brother convinced me to go enter them and compete, and so I got to competing in wild turkey calling contests and started having some success at it, and I grew into going, to bigger contests, and eventually in the late 70s ended up at a big contest in Kansas City. It was called the Mid-America Open, I believe, at the time. And the guy emceeing the contest was Bill Harper, and he owned Lohman Game Calls. And I didn't know the man, didn't know Lohman Game Calls. But after the contest, he came up to me and complimented me on my calling and my owl hooting and whatever, and wanted to know if I ever used anybody's product. And I said, well, no, I got my own calls and Grandpa made, or a friend of mine made for me, or whatever. I really didn't understand what he was getting at, but next thing I know, he loaded me up with a box full of Lohman Game Calls, and he said, "Give these a try and let me know how you like them." And I went ahead and gave them a try. I'd never had manufactured calls before, and certainly most of them are really good. And I used them in competition, used them in hunting, and reported back to him. I was well pleased with most of them, not all of them, but most of them. And it kind of built a relationship. And next thing you know, he's inviting me to guide some people in the hunting industry on turkey hunts. And the first people I was in a hunting camp with was John Morris Sr. and John Morris of the Bass Pro fame. And I was just a young kid at the time, and I was in camp with these type of people, and it kind of just gave me a foothold in the hunting industry. And within a year or two after that, Mr. Harper asked me if I'd come to work for him full time, and that's kind of where it all started.
Well, talking about how it all started, at that point, Lohman they just had turkey calls, my understanding. And then in the early 80s, you developed what we now know as the modern day grunt call. Explain how that came to be and the resistance you got from regular hunters when you said, "Hey, I've got this that'll help you."
Well, that's a neat story in itself. We going to work for Mr. Harper, and it was all really about turkey. And although they all hunted, and Lohman had, at the time, they were one of the largest game call companies in the world, and had a lot of different calls. Waterfowl was big, and turkey was growing with them. And they even had a deer call in their line. They had a bleat call. It was called the Alaskan bleat call. And I'd never hunted with it, never used it, but they had it in their line. And but after I went to work for him, it was certainly coming up on deer season. We're talking deer and all this, that, and the other. Well, previous in 1976, I had learned from a friend of mine. He and his brother were hunting, and his brother saw a small forky buck kind of messing with some does, and it made this grunting sound. Nobody had ever heard it before. Nobody ever described it before of anybody I knew. And so I'm working in the mines at the time with him, and he shared this information with me. So I'm thinking, well, what the heck? And I was an avid bow hunter, and I hunted with a recurve, and I needed animals super, super close. And I thought, well, there's nothing I wouldn't try to get a deer close to me to get a shot back then at that time. So he pinched his nose and mimicked this sound, and I practiced with him. And next thing you know, I'm off hunting one morning, and a buck goes by, and I pinch my nose and make a little grunt, and that buck stops, and I pinch my nose and grunt again, and that buck turns. He's out there 80 yards. He turns and walks right to me. He turns broadside at 18 steps, and I shoot under him. I missed the deer completely. But it just, a light bulb come on, so I thought, oh my gosh, this is golden. And for the next 4 or 5 years, we kept it, meaning it was a small group of guys that we hunted with that worked in the mines, kept it a secret. No, never told anybody, just 2 or 3 of us, 4 of us, we would talk about our successes and what we were doing with our vocal cords to make grunts. So I knew how effective it was. I was calling and killing deer and bucks. Weren't big bucks; they were just bucks. And but man, I realized how awesome this was. And so we jumped forward 4 or 5 years. I'm now working at Loman Game Calls. Came in as a turkey caller, and we're talking about the upcoming deer season. And Mr. Harper said, "Brad, what do you use the bleat deer call?" I said, "No, sir, I don't." He said, you don't like calls?" I said, "Oh yeah, I just don't use a bleat. I use a grunt." And he looked at me real strange. He said, "What's a grunt?" And that kind of started it. I explained the history to him. And I'm green. I mean, I'm a hillbilly. I'm a young guy. I'm now in the corporate world and don't have a clue what I'm doing. I just explained to him, "Mr. Harper, this is a sound that I learned. I've been fooling bucks with it now for 4 or 5 years, and it works." And he said, "What's it sound like?" I demonstrated. He said, "Can we get together and make this call?" I said, "Yeah." So we go out, gather up a bunch of duck call, all kinds of duck call paraphernalia, reeds and tone chambers and barrels. And I sat for hours and hours playing with those reeds and shortening them and using different tone chambers. But anyway, the process, I finally came up with a sound that I thought was, man, this is awful close. And all it was basically was a modified duck call. And I came back in and said, here it is. Here's what I think it sounds like. And we built, a handful of them, and deer season coming on, we all took them to the woods and with our hunting throughout that fall season, and realized that, by golly, they worked. And so the next year, the next SHOT Show, I think this was about 83 or 84, we brought that new grunt call to the market at the SHOT Show. And I believe the SHOT Show at that time was in New Orleans, if I recall. My memory isn't great, but we brought out the very first grunt deer call. And it was not well accepted. Nobody had heard of it. Nobody ever even heard the term. Nobody was teaching it. And yet, we're trying to sell it. People are coming into the booth. What's new for this year? Well, we had several new products in different lines, and all of a sudden I'd get, okay, now we got a new deer call. What do you mean a new deer call? Deer don't make noise. All they do is snort. No, we got a grunt. Well, what's a grunt? Well, I'd blow that modified duck call, and people would just look at me, and most of them would be respectful and say, "Well, we've never heard of nothing like that. I don't know if that'll sell." I mean, nobody's, you've never seen an article, never seen anybody write anything about it, never seen a biologist comment on it. It wasn't part of the local language because nobody knew about it. So it was not well received. And I can remember that was like in January. By my February and March, I'm doing seminars, deer hunting seminars, turkey hunting seminars at various spots. I'm doing seminars at various, sporting events and trade show, outdoor show, travel shows, whatever. And I go to Missouri Deer Classic in Columbia, Missouri. And here again, I'm a young man. I'm in my early 20s. And most of the guys in the audience, and it was 99% men in the audience, and there was probably 200, 250 people in the audience, and they're coming to hear a young guy talk about deer calling or deer hunting. And I went through my whole deer routine, as far as rubber boots and tracking, reading signs, scrapes, and tree stand play. Went through the whole deer hunting routine, and I got to the end. I said, "Guys, I want to share something with you that is new, but I'm telling you, it works like a charm." And I said, "We've come up with a call. It's called the grunt deer call. It simulates bucks that are active during the rut. And when you blow it, all you're doing is saying, 'I'm a deer, come here, there's something going on.' And then when the rut kicks in and the bucks are more active, the better it works. And they're all on the edge of their seats." And I take the call, I lift it up, and I went back. And literally half the guys in the audience fell out of their chairs laughing. It embarrassed the heck out of me. It's scary. I'm petrified. I'm young, new at this seminar game. But in my heart, I know I'm telling them the truth. I'm telling you, this works for me, and I'm a deer hunter. This is my passion, and it'll work for you too. And yet they laugh. I have men come up after the seminar and get in my face and say, "Hey, I've been deer hunting 40 years and, 30 or whatever it is. And I ain't never heard a deer make a sound like that. You're nuts. They don't do that." And I'd say, "Sir, I'm telling you the truth, But we fought those battles, and it took a couple of years. It really took a couple of years, and actually took another company or two to come on board to sell deer calls to really get the thing jump started. We laid the groundwork and we convinced some people, but it took other companies jumping on board 2 years down the road. And all of a sudden, well, if Loman's got it now and Night and Hale's got one, and, whoever else, Haydell, I think, come on with one pretty early. And all of a sudden it was giving it some validity. And another interesting point, there was about the time we introduced the call, about that same year, towards the end of the year. So the call had been on the market for a year. I get a message from a biologist in Texas. And the guy's name was Larry Richardson. I'll remember that name. I met him a couple times personally, but most of the correspondence by phone. But Larry was studying pen-raised deer in Texas, our ranch high-fence deer in Texas. And he came up and captured a grunt on tape recording. And he contacted me and he said, "You guys have, I know you have the grunt call, but do you have any audio?" "No, we don't have any audio. We just have the call and we hunt with it." He said, "I've captured the audio." And he sent me a cassette, and the cassette was called "The Acoustics of White-tailed Deer." And it took that a couple years to take hold. But once people start realizing, well, the Loman guys came out with it, and now we got a couple other companies that have kind of come on board, and now we have a biologist that captured the sound on tape. It all gave it validity, and then within 2 or 3 years after that, it was the greatest selling game call, I believe, of all time. The numbers were just super, super strong, and they still are today.
That's a very interesting story. Thank you for sharing that. So just switching gears here, as we are nearing deer season, what do you see would be the biggest mistake hunters make when in the deer, while they're in the deer stand or the deer blind?
Well, there's a lot of mistakes. Obviously, it just depends on the situation, the scenarios, and all that. Part of it is people from the beginning approaching their stands sometimes, and they just don't think about the approach as much as they should, what they're alerting deer, what the wind's doing, whatever. Sometimes they cripple themselves before they ever get to a stand or a blind. I mean, many, many times I've wanted to go to my best blind or the one I felt good about or stand and wouldn't go because the conditions weren't exactly right. I didn't want to educate the deer. It took a long time to realize don't educate the deer you're hunting by over hunting them or pushing a bad situation. So that's the beginning. The other is people, obviously, don't, and I was guilty of this for many years, don't stay long enough. You get in and hunt that first hour or two, get bored and get down, or don't get in early enough in the evening to let things calm down enough. So your approach and the amount of time you spend can be detrimental to you. I also believe that people just aren't alert very much in their stands. They're hunting and they're looking, but their mind is somewhere else. And now when you got cell phones, it's even worse. You're looking at cell phones, texting back and forth. You're missing some things. And people say, I'm not missing nothing. I'm alert. Well, I had an outdoor rider one time. I put him in a stand in a really good spot. I expected him to shoot a really good buck. And he comes in that evening or that after dark. I pick him up, and he hadn't seen anything, but he had a good hunt, and he read an entire book. I said, "You did what?" And he goes, "Yeah, I read this whole paperback this evening." I said, "Well, Mister," I said, "You need to, you don't need to be reading up in the stand. You need to be watching and listening. Oh, I don't miss nothing. I'm looking up. Well, how do you read an entire book? I'm promising you, you're missing something. And the next day I proved it to him because I put him in the same stand. And just for fun, I snuck up on him, ended up right above, below his tree while he was reading, and he didn't hear me. And I pointed at him. I said, now listen, if a clumsy old klutz like me can sneak up on you and stand under your tree, trust me, these deer are walking by you, you're not seeing them. And it made a point, and I didn't do it. It was just like, you got to pay attention. And not only visually, but even listening. A lot of hunters make mistakes. They're not alerted by other animals in the woods, your non-target animals. I mean, squirrels and ravens and crows, all those animals trigger my instincts. If I hear them make noise, then it puts me on red alert. I mean, because a lot of times a squirrel or a crow will give away a deer or a turkey's position. Not all the time, but when a squirrel jumps up off the ground and starts barking real loud, something's going on. He saw something. He's paying attention to something. He's alerting the other squirrel to something going on. That something going on could be a coyote. It could be a hawk, but it also could be a buck deer or a strutting gobbler. I learned that a long time ago. So I listen while I'm hunting deer, I'm listening to all the other animals in the woods trying to give me some information that something might be going on just out of my sight. And there's where the call really came in handy for me because I'm an aggressive caller anyway. But when I get in a tree with a grunt call, and this is another mistake a lot of people make with the grunt call, they don't have any confidence in it. And they only believe it's for when you see a deer and he's out of range. Well, I call when timing is right. I call whether I'm seeing deer or not, And so I tell them it's like a fisherman going fishing. You put him in a boat, you give him a rod and reel and a spinner bait, and let's go fishing, but he won't cast. Well, or maybe he's lazy, he only casts once every 5 minutes. And he's, talking or reading or writing or visiting or enjoying life, but you're not going to catch fish that way. You got to make cast after cast after cast to get that one hooked. And I find that same way when it comes to deer hunting, and I'm on my stand. If I'm up there, I'm in a spot that I believe is a good spot because I've read the sign. I feel like there's a lot of deer in the area, or the animal I'm targeting is in the area. And so that's why I'm there. So I'm sitting in a stand. If I'm sitting there 8 hours a day and just looking and not making any noise, I'm not making any casts. Well, yeah, I might kill him, but look at all that dead time. I became a firm believer that every so often I would grunt to my left and grunt to my right and sit and listen. And many times I've had deer walk to me from those calls that I didn't even know were in the area. Many times. So I believe that if I'm in a stand, I am going to cast once in a while. And the big problem with that is most people, if they try it, and it doesn't work for them 4 or 5 times in a row, well, that ain't working. Well, no, it don't work every time. It may only work once for you in the season, but isn't that worth it if it's the right deer? But I've had it work so many times that it's something that I do, all the time. I carry a grunt call with me when I'm deer hunting, no matter what the season is. But I also realize that as the rut factors phase in, the pre, the peak, and the post rut makes that call even better. So I use it even more during those times. And I call blind a lot because I want to cast out there. Because in the Ozarks where I'm from, and then of course up in Canada and the areas you guys are at, my gosh, it's thick. Deer can be walking around you within 60, 70, 80 yards, and you don't know it,
Right.
And that call helps me reach out there and say, hey, I'm a deer, come here, every so often. And it has produced that way. So a lot of mistakes you can make hunting, but one of them with pertaining to the call is you just don't have confidence in it and you don't use it enough at the right time of year.
How frequently are you making that blind call? Every 15 minutes, every 30 minutes, a cycle?
Yeah, okay. I tell people, I get asked all the time, well, how have you caught? So when I feel like it.
Okay.
When I'm sitting here and it might have been 15 minutes, it might have been an hour. And I'm thinking, hey, I got to make something happen. It's dead. I'm not. And so when I feel like it, I grunt this way and I grunt that way. And the key is remember when you make a cast, expect action for the next 10 or 15 minutes. don't make a cast call this way and that way. Put the call away, look around a little bit, and then start digging in your pack for some crackers, because that's when you're going to get caught. You know,
right.
Because when a deer comes, they're looking. Okay, yeah, I hear you. I'm coming. And I've had them walk in. I've had them feed their way in. I've had them run in. So you never know what the response is. I've had them literally run within 30 seconds or whatever after I made the call. I've killed the deer with my bow. And other times it's 10 minutes later and I see them easing through, picking up an acorn, but they look up and then they ease my way. And it might take them 15 minutes to get to me. So you never know what response you're going to get. You just got to be prepared for it. And it really, really is a great way to hunt and take advantage of dead time. And in mentioning those animals, I talked about the other critters in the wild. If I'm sitting in a stand and I hear a raven just all of a sudden just go crazy, or a crow, or if I hear a squirrel barking off to my right, I watch that area looking intently because something's there. I don't know what it is, but it might be the buck I want trying to kill. I don't know and I don't know why they do it, but I've watched squirrels and birds and blue jays. I mean, you just name it. I've watched them fuss at buck deer and at gobblers. So it's giving me a lot of heads up. But when I'm sitting in a tree and I hear a squirrel barking aggressively, and I watch that area for a few minutes and I don't see something, I immediately grunt that direction. So I'm saying, okay, you saw something. I don't know what it is, but there's something over there. I'm going to grunt before it gets out of earshot, whatever it might be. If it's a buck, he might hear, he might come in. If it's a coyote, he's probably not paying any attention to it. So but you never, ever know.
Exactly. When Holly and I watch hunting videos on YouTube and DVDs and that, we see hunters like you all over the country shooting elk on mountains and deer and this, that. What is the protocol? How, like, behind the scenes, are you bringing that meat home? Are you just bringing the trophy home, the back wings or the antlers? Or is it getting donated to the local food shelter? What goes on behind the scenes that nobody really talks about?
Well, I think there's a little bit of everything involved there, depending on who it is and where you're at and how you've traveled and all that. Me personally, I have always been one and was raised that if you killed it, you ate it, for the most part, if It was game animal. I mean, wild game animal that you targeted, if you kill it, you eat it and you take care of it. And so for me, most of my travels, I would, either if I'm driving, I make sure I have, when I go elk hunting, I take 250 quart coolers and I bring my meat back with me every time when I'm driving. I've had my meat shipped back via airlines. So I try to personally, no matter what I shoot, sometimes I'll get it processed. If I kill a bull elk, I did last year, killed a bull elk. It got up to 90 degrees that day. I took it straight to a cooler in Sheridan, Wyoming, and the guy cut it up for me. And within a week, he calls me, it's done, and it's frozen solid when you get ready to pick it up. And that's my preference, the way I really like to do it. Sometimes you don't have access to a processor, so you got to quarter it and cool it yourself, and then bring it home in quarters. So, but yeah, I try to make sure on most of my hunts I've ever done is I bring that meat back with me. The only exception to that was I went to Africa and hunted Africa, and I've hunted Mexico and some of the Canadian provinces. And sometimes, you get, where you can't pack it all or whatever, or in Africa, you just literally can't afford to ship meat home. But there's great places to give it. I mean, I gave all my African game meat to the villagers, and they let's just say they appreciated it above and beyond. So it was a blessing. So even if I could have brought it home, I wouldn't have. I would have gave it to them because they wanted it, they needed it, they cherished it. And then there's been other places I've been in Mexico or even in Canadian province where, okay, hey, I know a person that wants that meat, would take that meat, would love to have that meat, and I would get that processed and give it to them rather than haul it home. And so it works out great. And at least a lot of the so-called outdoor guys that are well-known outdoor people I've hunted with, that's their MO. They make sure that meat is not wasted.
Right. Well, many people, as I informed early in the program, found you on the Loman Whitetail Challenge series. You also did Whitetail Turkey Challenge, Real Hunting Elk Challenge, and you've been a pro staffer for Realtree since 1987. How does one become a pro staff member, and the positives and the negatives? And obviously things have changed over that time. You know, 87, Bill Jordan was just getting started in Realtree. They're celebrating their 40th anniversary this year or next year or something like that. How does that work then and now, pros and cons?
Well, back then, whenever I got started, but there was no such thing as a professional outdoorsman. I mean, there was, if you think about it, there was TV shows, American Hunter on TV, and you saw celebrities like Bing Crosby and some of those old time people that did a little hunting on that TV show. But there wasn't what I would call a huge opportunity to get in the outdoor industry. And what basically broke it for me and many others of my age in that era was competition calling or shooting. So if you excel locally at your local trap shooting club, took it to the next level, excelled at the state level or national level, then you started getting companies that were interested in you, that because of your abilities, you would be, an asset to them. And so because the era was when it was, things were growing and the game populations were exploding, it offered some guys like me opportunities. And so I got my notoriety from competing in turkey calling and owl hooting. I owl hooted my voice and I turkey called, and I got notoriety from that of winning competitions back when the early days of competition. And there was lots of game call and hunting companies that were getting into the business or expanding their business, and they were looking for so-called experts or at least people with experience in the hunting field, whether it be at the time it was turkey, or whether it be a duck and goose guy who could, world champion type duck or goose caller, or a guy that, was a guide and a super, super good waterfowl guide and got well known and getting bigger and bigger in his business. He would draw attention to people. So that's how you had to get started back in the day. Now it's totally different. Those opportunities have been saturated, and with the social media platforms, which I know nothing about and quite frankly don't care about, but now I hear, or see and talk to people. Oh, you watch this YouTube video? You watch this podcast? No, I don't. You ever seen? No, I never seen that guy. I never heard of that guy. No. Well, no, I don't do YouTube. I'm sorry, I don't. I mean, I'm old school. I ain't got time to sit around and watch hunting. I'm out hunting. Even at my age, I'm out hunting and fishing and taking my grandkids. I mean, I want to be out there doing it, not watching it. But right. Anyway, that has changed the game, and it seemed like anybody with a phone or cell cam or a little camera now can find himself a little bit of an audience and maybe gather a pro staff position with a company or two here and there. Pro staff meaning most of the time just getting some product, but occasionally there's some money change hands where a guy can make a little money off of a pro staff agreement. And, but those days are slowly getting saturated. I mean, the boom was in the 80s, late 80s and 90s when things boomed and you really saw certain celebrities that stepped into the industry, and some of them didn't do anything but have a good place to deer hunt. They had a good place to deer hunt and they killed big deer. And so by killing big deer, it attracted companies to pay them and start paying them some money to promote their product. But those days are certainly pretty much over with now because it's just totally saturated.
Well, and just from when you filmed, let's say Whitetail Challenge 3, 4, the amount of weight one camera had, now people are in the tree stand with 5 or 6 little cameras filming themselves and getting phenomenal shots that you only dreamed about whenever you were trying to capture the content for one of those video series.
Oh, that's no doubt. I can remember the first video attempt that we made was in about 1980. and we were going to film start filming spring turkey hunts. And my goodness, it was a nightmare. Number one, we just didn't know how to do it. So it was learn by the seat of your pants thing, and learning how to set up properly and all that was very important. But the equipment we drug through the woods, I mean, we literally had a 3/4-inch tape camera. The darn thing had to weigh 40 pounds, and it was by itself. And then you had the cassette deck. So it was a deck that weighed 40 pounds, and it was tethered to the camera with a 3-foot tether. And so you had the camera, and then you had the recording deck, and then you had 40, 50 pounds of batteries. The batteries were like carrying motorcycle batteries or better, and you carried 5 or 6 of them around on a belt. And it was a nightmare. And the tripods were, oh my gosh, they were huge. And so, yeah, the learning curve of capturing footage was huge. But the equipment you worked with was, oh my gosh, it was unbearable. And now, I go out on my little cell phone and go in my backyard and call up a turkey or watch a video of deer. I can get some pretty good footage holding my cell phone and in my hand, not even on a tripod. So it's changed a lot.
Absolutely. You started with Loman. Loman doesn't seem to be in the industry. What happened? What was there a downfall of Loman in your opinion, or what happened to the company? I think Mad bought them out. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's not. I don't know what happened to Loman now. I have no idea where the status is of them now. I left Loman in 2003, and my best recollection, we were a little over an $8 million game call company in 2003, and very healthy. Not huge, but for game calls that was huge, maybe the biggest. But it was healthy, and it basically, had 25, 30 families it supported locally. It was really doing well. I think what happened is people are smarter than me, realized that they could buy up some of these smaller companies and put together a conglomerate of hunting. That, for whatever reason, they saw that as, hey, let's bring 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 of these smaller companies together and make one large conglomerate and dominate the hunting industry. And like I said, I'm not a smart man, but I saw that. Well, yeah, I guess that could work. That'd be kind of neat to try and all that. But what happened was when Loman was sucked into one of those type of buyouts and one of those corporate growth, company growth things, and we were one of 8 or 9 companies that were bought and brought in under one umbrella. And real quick, and just for an old hillbilly like me, I could see right away that all of a sudden Loman and none of these companies, including Loman, were getting the attention that, were given to them when they were standalone companies. In other words, I worked for Loman. It was all Loman, 100%, 24/7, 365. It was about Loman Game Call Company. And so was all the other employees that were under that company. And when we went under a big corporate umbrella, it was fragmented so much. And then you also got people coming in, put in place to make decisions that, quite frankly, were knowledgeable and smart businessmen, but didn't understand the hunting side of it.
Yeah.
And back then, you had to relate to the hunter, and you had to be a hunter, and you had to relate to that hunter in order to have good sales. And that all kind of went out the window when the corporate took over. And so that kind of started the downfall. And then within that umbrella, there were some decisions made that crippled the entire group. In other words, there was some tree stands that were faulty that came back and haunted us. There was some feeder parts that were faulty that came, all for the sake of saving $1 and not doing the proper
due diligence,
exploring, due diligence of changing parts. They change the feeder parts, and all of a sudden the feeders don't run no more. Well, you don't get a guy, an average Joe that loves to hunt and fish, and you don't sell him a product, and he goes out and within the first day or second day, that product fails.
Right.
And that same way with the tree stands, we had tree stands that were failing, and that's not only bad, but that's also critically dangerous. And so when a couple of those things started happening within that umbrella, it just brought the whole system down. And that's when I decided that this corporate life was not for me.
Well, yeah, you were the face of Loman on the Whitetail Challenge 1 through 7, and then 8 came out, and you were on one cover, and the Mad People were on the other, but the videos were the same. And I don't know if 9 even exists. Then 10 came out, so it was really just kind of a scattered thing. And if Loman didn't, in my opinion, which I probably paid for a couple of your checks based on the stuff I bought from Loman, Loman would probably still be around today if it wasn't the greed aspect, because they had top quality calls every single year. A new model came out and it was better than the last one.
Yeah, I think Loman would still be a big factor today. It may not have the growth, but because of the the competition, but it would have held its own even today if it would have been kept as a family oriented operation. I do believe that, but that's what progress does sometimes, so I just realized that wasn't the company I grew up with. The opportunities weren't like I thought they would be, and so it was time to move on.
Now, you've been a pro staff member for Realtree since 1987. In your opinion, I mean, I know you're kind of loyal to Realtree, and growing up for me, there was Realtree, Mossy Oak, and Tree Bark, and that was it. Now there's like 2 handfuls of camouflage companies. Is there one camouflage pattern or company you think is better than others, or are they kind of all the same, just with different bells and whistles?
Well, I think you talked about Realtree. Realtree is my go-to camo and has been since I met Bill Jordan back in '86, I believe it was. And once I met him, saw the kind of person he was, he got a great looking camo. And I tell everybody, quite frankly, I killed deer and turkey with whatever I could put on. Plaid shirts and Vietnam camouflage, hand-me-down Vietnam camouflage, tiger stripe. I even wore a little bit of Tree Bark because they were the first ones to come out, and but it was Tree Bark was for setting against a tree, right. So it lost something if you were hunting in green vines and things like that. But when I met Bill and I saw the Realtree pattern, I thought, no, I like that. That thing, it was more universal. So that's what drew me to it. But more importantly, Bill drew me to it because I like Bill Jordan and I are good friends and have been for 40 years. I just left down there 3 weeks ago. I did that 40th reunion video shoot with Bill.
That is a phenomenal. That is a phenomenal little place he's got there with the race cars and all the heads and oh my goodness,
absolutely beautiful. He's done very well, but more importantly, Bill's just a good guy.
Yes.
I enjoy hunting camps with Bill, especially when it's just Bill and I. We've been on many hunting trips. So it's just he and I and a couple camera guys, and my goodness, you couldn't ask to go with a better guy. He's just good people. So that gravitated. Now, Mossy Oak, great looking camouflage, great people. I don't know Toxie Hayes all that well, but what dealings I've had with him, he's a good guy. I like him. And so, he's got a great product as well. And then there's 2 or 3 or half a dozen others that are adequate and do well, and especially in certain terrains, they shine. But when it comes just to kind of good old ordinary every day, I'm in the woods, whether I'm turkey hunting in the spring, whether I'm in a fall tree stand, whether I'm in the mountains in the Rockies chasing bulls, that, the good old Realtree has always been there and blended in for me when I needed it. And like I said, I believe Mossy Oak's right along with in that realm, and maybe another one or two.
And Bill Jordan, I met him in 1998, the first ever Illinois Youth Turkey Hunt, Jake's Day. He was there. The late Dick Kirby was there. Knight and Hale was there. I hunted with former CEO of National Wild Turkey Federation, Rob Keck. You don't get very far in this industry if you're a jerk.
No, that's true. That is true. you will find a lot of roadblocks, and that's why you see a guy like Bill Jordan and Toxie Hayes and others that have done well, because they're not only have a good product, but they're personable people. They're smart people. I think where Bill really shined, he was the first guy that ever really came out and marketed a quality Realtree pattern, and made it cool to be wearing camouflage. So you got people wearing camouflage are going to Walmart and shopping on it. It became cool to wear camouflage, and Bill made that happen. Now, it all came about for the hunter and making the hunter hide and giving the hunter confidence that he's, as invisible as he could possibly be. But it made it kind of cool. You see people in camo shorts and camo shirts and Friday night football games and Walmart or shopping or wherever, you're going to see camouflage. So he made it cool to wear camouflage.
It became a style and a statement.
Yes, very much so.
You started hunting when there was no such thing as a trail camera, and then they had the cameras where the little string tripped and you had to get, 428, I don't know what it was, but something ran across it. And now we've got trail cameras that have advanced so rapidly, even in the last 10 years. Do you feel that trail cameras, the cellular cameras, is it hurting the industry, or is it making it better, or is it a little bit of both?
A little bit of both. And, I did grow up without cameras, learned to hunt by reading sign. And that's what made hunting what it is for me. And that's what gave me the drive and the passion. So I guess with trail cameras, my most honest statement with trail cameras is the fact that it's taken the hunt out of hunting. And I know I'm going to make people mad when I say this, but I'm just speaking from my heart. I've got a backpack over there in the corner of my man cave. It's got 25, 30 cell cameras in it. So I use cell cameras. Now, let me back up. No, I lied. I don't use cell camera. I have game cameras.
Okay.
That with SD cards.
Okay.
I own one cell camera. I put it out. It worked for about 2 weeks, sending me photos of my phone. It quit working. I couldn't get it to work again. Didn't like the customer support I got. I swore off of them. I'm never going to do it again. I went back to my SD cameras, SD cards, and I monitored them, myself. And so with that being said, I don't have cell cameras. My grandsons have cell cameras, and they know how to use them, and they know how to work them. Grandpa's not that smart. So anyway, I get frustrated, and I'll go back to what I know and what works. So I use cameras, but it does take the hunt out of hunting. I don't have to, I can just name off deer that I've killed in the last 10 years that have been directly, the reason they died was because of the cell camera.
Right.
One, for instance, I put a cell camera on an open gate to a 300-acre pasture. There was 3 or 4 open gates where they've hayed the pasture, and now it's fall and they're gone. The gates are open. Put a camera on each gate, because sometimes these big old fat bucks, they get lazy. And, sometimes they'll just jump the fence no matter what. But sometimes they'll walk an extra 100 yards to go through an open gate so they don't have to jump. And that camera picked that buck up doing that a couple evenings in a row, and I killed him. The camera did the camera did it. And I didn't do it.
Right.
Big buck, really big buck. So, did I use? Yep. Was it legal? Yes. But when I look at it, did I, Brad Harris, really figure that deer out and really put the time and effort into it and really scout and really hunt hard? Nope. That's not the case. If people who say, "Oh, I don't help you that much," well, they're lying. I spent, when I retired or left Loman, I've spent 23 years managing whitetail hunting properties all over the country, from Missouri, Kansas, Montana, South Dakota, Wyoming. I managed big ranches, and we managed for hunting, and the bulk of that hunting was whitetail. And so my job was to make it the best whitetail hunting possible, each ranch that I did. And of course, a big part of that ranch was knowing what I had to work with and what we were doing, how it was affecting the quality of our deer in year 2 and year 3. So cameras, I ran 20, 25 cameras religiously on each ranch. In October or August rather, I did deer surveys where I ran cameras over corn piles where it was legal, and I would monitor deer, and I would get about 98% of the deer, in my opinion, I'd get on camera, and I knew what I had. There was always an occasional one that, we killed, never got a picture of that deer. So I believe there's a few that are camera shy, but not many, but right. There are a few. I've got video and photographic proof of that. So, but, I spent a lot of time with cameras, and boy, I realized they are a super tool to know what you got and what they're doing. And yes, I do use them, but it's hurt the educational part, or at least the hunt part of hunting. You don't have to be as savvy as you once did by using a lot of electronic gadgets today.
Now, what is your thoughts on the CWD? You think it's a real thing? You think it's more hyped up than what it is? Because deer communicate by licking each other in nature, and this whole thing of no food plots or no baits and this and that. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, again, and I my personal thought is CWD is real. I just don't know how devastating it is to me, because managing all these properties over the last many years and watching hundreds of whitetails on a weekly basis, and I just never found dead deer that I couldn't identify that died from CWD.
Right.
But I could find a lot of deer that I could identify that died from EHD, and I'm talking hundreds over the years. So I worry about, okay, CWD is real, but just how bad is it? I mean, I don't think anybody knows. That's what worries me. Mm-hmm. That's what scares me. But from my standpoint of my own personal world, and that's just my opinion of what I see, and I'm no expert, but most deer I find dead, and like I said, I found hundreds that I could pretty much confirm were CWD deaths. But I occasionally find other deer that I find dead and I would search the reasons why it was found and see if I could see if there's predation, a car impact, maybe an errant shot. I try to investigate and could, a lot of time figure out what happened to even deer that I didn't think was EHD. So, but I still struggle with the CWD thing. I still watch a lot of deer on a daily basis, and I just don't see it. But with that being said, I think it's real. I just think we're kind of throwing, darts at the board,
right.
As far as what is really going on. And then and for instance, here, like in Missouri, we're shooting a lot of deer, and we're killing a lot of deer in CWD areas. And when you test them, only like 0.02 or 03% actually have CWD. So 99% of them are healthy. That bothers me. I just don't understand that concept, but I'm not a biologist,
right.
I just don't believe that, killing the healthy makes it. And then, of course, I said, well, we don't want you to bait because of these prions in the dirt. And then that's where the deer get it. But like you mentioned a while ago, licking branches, scrapes, licking branches are all over, not just over scrapes. They're all over the woods.
Yeah, got to use some common sense.
A branch and they lick them year round. I mean, it's like, okay. I mean, I see what you're saying, but in the wild, these deer are social. They're licking each other. They're sniffing each other. They're eating off the same, yard. I'm watching 3 deer right now eating in a little 1/4 acre clover plot I got. And, every deer in the world comes in there between now and midnight that's around here. And I was like, why am I not seeing dead deer? What's going on with that? And then the state is using bait to shoot all those deer. It's like, well, if you're telling me not to bait,
right, because
of prions, you're baiting to shoot the bulk of the deer you're shooting are healthy, and you're baiting. So what sick deer you have apparently are leaving prions there, and then you tell me that prions are there for life.
Yeah,
I'm confused. I am a very confused hunter, but I have my opinion. I just don't think. I don't think at this point that it's as bad as they want us to believe, but I can't prove that.
Well, what is your most memorable hunt, and what has been your what can you identify as your most disappointing hunt?
Oh, well, my most memorable hunts have certainly been with my kids and grandkids and family. I mean, I can, when people say, hey, what was some of your funnest hunts or whatever, it wasn't about the big bucks that I killed or even the big elk that I've killed or the turkeys that I've killed. I think back to my, son, my oldest son, when he was 10 or 12 years old, killing his first deer and turkey. And my youngest son, who at 13 killed a Boone and Crockett whitetail. And it's like, I'd never killed a Boone and Crockett. And yet I got to sit in the same stand and video him shooting a Boone and Crockett in the Missouri Ozarks. And which all the above was just unheard of. And
that was a Whitetail Challenge 3, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I made the cover of that. Yeah. It was just, those are kind of memories. My granddaughter shooting a 6-bearded gobbler, being a young little girl shoots her first, her second or third gobbler actually that she'd ever killed, but it was a 6-bearded, beautiful bird that, many hunters, good hunters, hunt a lifetime and never shoot a 6-bearded gobbler, So the most memorable hunts are certainly with my family and especially my kids and my grandkids. And it continues today. I hunt every year with my family. And now that I don't do press hunts and all that stuff anymore and outdoor rider camps, it's all about me and my kids and grandkids. And of course I got nieces and nephews, and this year I've been blessed to be able to take 2 or 3 of the nephews, and they're all getting up older. They're in their late 20s and 30s and early 40s, and got to take a niece and a nephew that are in their early 20s this year, and she'd never killed a bird. I got to call her in her first Merriam, and she killed it. Those are memories you just can't, they stick out in my mind. If I sit and talk long enough or visit long enough, or I was sitting in my man cave and somebody asked me about a particular mount or a buck on the wall, I can tell you every bit of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And it's exciting, and I get excited reliving it, and they're all memorable, but they're not the most memorable. I guess the most disappointing hunt would have been, a couple of them. One whitetail buck that's been on my mind since back about 1981. Saw a buck come in I was hunting the edge of it was kind of an edge between heavy mature timber and brush. I was smart enough to hunt the edges and look for sign on the edges. I found some very, very large sign, put my stand up, but I put it up about 40 yards off the edge and sat in the tree and outstepped out of the thick stuff on the edge, stepped what I believe was a 200+ inch buck, typical. And the buck stepped out and just stood and stared out across that. He wasn't looking at me, but he was looking out in the general area and just standing and not moving. He just stood and stared, and I'm begging and praying that he comes. And yet, I never have been a great bow shot, but 40 yards was doable. Not one I wanted to take, but if I had it all to go over again, I would have certainly took that shot with confidence. But it's not what I wanted. And I was so wrapped up in this deer and the giant size of this deer. And he stood there for so long, and it kind of reverted back to where he didn't smell me. He didn't know I was there, but he sensed something was wrong.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I was shaking so bad or whether I was breathing so hard I didn't even know. This buck had me shook up. I wasn't making noise. The wind was in my favor. He didn't wind me. He didn't see me. He sensed danger.
Yeah.
He stood there for 10 minutes without moving. That just fried my brain. And at the time, I'm thinking, what do I do? I can't reach for the call. He's just looking. I can't do anything but watch. And he just turns and like a ghost, drifts back into that timber. And that was a memorable. I never saw that deer again. Never heard of anybody killing a big deer like that in that area. So that was one of the memorable, and it was a hunt that I wasn't successful. And then a bad memory of a giant bull elk in Idaho way back in 83, 84. I shot a monster bull that I didn't recover for about 10 days. and that was devastating and made me sick. And that happens, that happens. And there's several of those that were bad, but I remember that one. It was like, a giant elk, and and let something like that happen, and I really should have, and could have done better. I always think that, and you learn from those mistakes, and I think that's where I meant about a while ago saying it takes the hunt out of hunting. You got to go through bad experiences, and you got to work through them and learn from them and conquer them to get better and better at your trade. And that's something that I prided myself to doing all these years.
Yeah. Well, Brad, I appreciate, Holly and I appreciate your time. How can people find out more about you? Where do you have a Facebook page or something that people can follow you on?
Well, there is. There's a Brad Harris Outdoors Facebook page. I have I got the regular Brad Harris page that I'm on most of the time. Just friends, they can look me up and send me a friend request, and we'll check them out and see what we can do. I love to visit. Love most of my people that I deal with are either family or a huge group of hunters that have followed me for years or I've met over the years. So it's that's what I love about Facebook. Keeps me connected with a lot of the old timers and the old acquaintances and friends and family that love the outdoors. And that's kind of the people I like to be associated with. So, and soon I'll be doing I've got it in the works. I just dragging my feet, but I'll have a website, Brad Harris Outdoors website. I've got it put together. I just haven't got it completed, but I hopefully within the next really 4 to 6 months, I'll have that up and running. Primarily, I do that, number one, so people can find me if they have some interest, but also in our ministry and outreach, I do word of mouth ministry. I go speak at give seminars and share my testimony, my faith in Jesus Christ. And that's the only seminars I do anymore is the faith-based seminars. But I love to go to wild game banquets, wild game dinners. I love to do seminars, hunting seminars of all kinds, and share, the thrill of the hunt of any kind of critter you want to hunt, and put on a show and entertain people. Then I want to share my faith in Christ, and that's what I do anymore.
Well, Brad, we thank you so much for the time that you've offered for Holly and myself and the knowledge.
Thank you, Brad.
Thank you, Holly, and good luck with your crossbow.
Thank you.
You bet. Send me pics.
Oh, we will.
All right, guys. Thanks very much.
Absolutely.